So I've been wanting to make this video for a while now, and I'm finally getting around to doing it. As you see from the title, it is called 5 Things I've Learned About Business from My 2-year-old, which my 2-year-old's actually now 3 years old. And yes, I am doing the video from my car. It is the only place I could find where I could completely avoid distractions and interruptions. So, my husband and I both have our bachelor's degrees in business. I have my MBA. We've started one business and we're in the process of starting our first nonprofit. But it's funny because in life you'll find that children will teach you a whole lot more than anything else ever could. So before I get started on my 5 points, I need to give you a brief background about my daughter because it will help explain my examples. So my daughter was born with something called tibial hemimelia, and in her case that means she is missing part of her tibia bone or shin bone, and that caused her leg, it's her right leg, it caused it to be shorter, and her foot, instead of being flat, it was turned inward. And we, starting from days after she was born, we visited multiple doctors and a couple different specialist hospitals. We even talked to a physician via email, and every single doctor told us the best option, or the best thing that we could do for her, was to amputate her leg. We were even told by one doctor that she would never walk on her own 2 feet. So basically, fast forward months later, we happened to find a physician here in Florida. We were living in Houston at the time, and we are now living in Florida. We flew down to meet with this doctor, and we talked to him, and he told us that we did not need to amputate her leg, and that he would be able to straighten out her foot and lengthen her leg so that she could walk on her own 2 feet. So basically, just really quick, we could have stayed in Houston. We had to be in Florida for months at a time. We were just in a position where we were able to move to Florida, so we ended up moving here to Florida. And she went through about 7 to 8 months of this treatment that included physical therapy. She was in something called a fixator on her leg. She went through a couple different surgeries, and 8 months after we started that, she is now able to walk on her own 2 feet. She does have a shoe lift, but she runs, she walks, she dances on her own 2 feet. So with that being said, during that process, I started thinking of how a lot of the lessons I learned along the way apply to business. And not even just business, but really anything in life. It applies to, just life in general, or anything you want to do in life. So my first point is that sometimes you need to step out of your comfort zone in order to get and achieve what you want. For us, even just coming to Florida for the initial consultation with the doctor, not really having a whole lot of background about him or what he does, that alone was stepping out of our comfort zone. Moving to Florida and starting this whole process was stepping out of our comfort zone. And it's the same in business. Sometimes, stepping out of your comfort zone it's different for everybody, but it takes, stepping out of your comfort zone is, if you stayed in whatever's comfortable, you wouldn't get very far in life. You need to take risks. You need to accept challenges. If you want to start a business, sometimes you need to step out of your comfort zone and just file the papers. Sometimes you need to just create the website, or whatever it is that you want to do. You sometimes just need to take that initial step. My second point is that people will not always understand what or why you're doing something. In our case, a lot of people didn't understand why we had to go all the way to Florida for my daughter to get treated, or to see a doctor in Florida. Houston has great hospitals and great doctors, and so a lot of people didn't understand why we couldn't find somebody there. They didn't understand that this was the only doctor we could find that told us not to amputate, that told us there were other options than amputation. So, for us, that's okay. We knew why we were doing it, and so we did it. It doesn't matter what other people think. And so it's the same in business, that you know what you're going to do or what you want to do, you know why you want to do it, and not everybody will always understand that. And you can't always listen to other people. If you always listen to other people, you wouldn't do anything in life, because there's always going to be somebody who tells you it's not worth your time, or somebody who, puts you down or speaks negatively about what you want to do. So, you know, it's okay if people don't understand. As long as you know what you want and why you want it, you just have to go for it. My third point is that it may cost you to get what you want. And that doesn't always necessarily mean financially. It could, but not always. What I mean is, for us, when we came to Florida to undergo my daughter's surgeries and her treatments, we basically gave up our life in Houston. We left family that was in Houston, and we came to Florida where we knew basically nobody and had no family. And so, you know, it cost us. We gave up something in order to achieve and get what we wanted. And that's the same with business or anything else you want in life. Sometimes you have to give up something. That could be people who negatively influence your life. It could be, I don't know, it could be anything. I mean, just know that there's sometimes something you have to give up in order to get what you want. Number 4 is that it may be hard initially, but it will pay off in the end. For us, in the case of my daughter, like, it was very hard. The whole process, like going to physical therapy every day, the pain she was in, the sleepless nights, like the first couple nights I literally got a total of 7 hours of sleep. And it was very rough and very hard initially. And throughout the whole time, there was a lot of difficulties. So initially, it may be hard. You may, if you want to start a business, you may have to put in a lot of hard work before you even see $1 of profit. You may have to put in time and effort and blood, sweat, and tears before you see anything paying off. I mean, we went through 7 months, well, really 8 months of treatments, physical therapies, various surgeries, etc., in order to get to the point where my daughter could walk. And she's now walking on her own 2 feet, running and doing anything and everything. But we had to go through 8 months of not so fun times in order to get there. So number 5, which is my last point, is that sometimes you have to remind yourself why you're doing what you're doing. You know, even if you currently have a business or if you want to start a business, even when things are going great or you're making money and everything seems to be okay, there's going to be, more than likely, will be times where you're going to hit some rough patches. Business may slow down. You know, I don't know. There's so many different things that could happen. And for us, we saw, for my daughter, we did hit some rough patches. You know, things would be going okay, and then she would be in a lot of pain. Or we actually hit a setback at one point, which somewhat slowed down the process, and we ended up having to stay in the hospital for 10 nights. It was totally unplanned, and it was not fun. And it was very hard, but it's at those times where you need to remind yourself why you're doing what you're doing. And one thing I recommend is to write down on a piece of paper why you're doing what you're doing. Anybody who starts a business, or anybody who goes back to school, or anybody who sets out to do anything in life usually has a reason why they're doing it. You're either going to school to get a job that you want, you're going to school to get a job that makes more money, you're starting out your own business because it's something you have a passion to do. You know, whatever it is, there's probably a reason why you're doing it. And so I recommend writing down your reason why. Because during those rough times when you want to give up, when nothing seems to be going away, you take out that piece of paper where you wrote that down and you read through your why. And that's going to help remind you why you're doing what you're doing and to help push you. I remember at one point, it was like the first couple days after my daughter got her, what was called a fixator, what was on her leg. When she first got that put on, she cried and she was not sleeping well, which means I cried, I was not sleeping well, and it was very rough. And I remember specifically thinking, like, did we make the wrong decision? Like, in that moment, I remember thinking, amputation sounded way easier. And I mean, there's difficulties. I'm not saying amputation's easy or anything like that. But in that time, I just remember thinking, did we make the right decision? Is this what we're supposed to do? Like, it was so difficult. But I just kept reminding myself why we were doing it. You know, we set out to get my daughter to walk on her own 2 feet. You know, we wanted her to, throughout her whole life, be able to walk on her own 2 feet. And I will make a note, or will point out right now, that there's nothing wrong with amputation. Sometimes amputation is necessary. Sometimes people prefer amputation. Sometimes that's your only option. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with amputation. My whole point is that it was not right for us, and we did not believe it was right for my daughter. So I'm not speaking negatively about amputation, but for us, you know, we wanted her to walk on her own 2 feet, and we had found the doctor that could and would make it possible, and that is why we did what we did. And so I had to keep reminding myself, like, there's going to be an end. This is not forever. You know, anytime she was in pain or would just cry or any of that, I had to remind myself why. So that's the same in business. So those are my 5 tips. Something I learned from my 2-year-old while we were going through her treatments. Hopefully, if starting a business is something you want to do, or if you already have a business, hopefully these tips helped encourage you to keep going or to finally make that initial step to start your business and do what you want to do.